once again, pull the corners out to tighten up the intersection. We also, in front of the chamber, want to pull this area out, pull the curb out, and this is going to create an area, a pedestrian type area here, that would allow you to maybe put some sort of iconic symbol there, or some sort of statue or something. Maybe that symbol that you want to use to brand your downtown with, this would be a perfect location for that. The other key intersection, and we kept hearing, I think every group mentioned this intersection the other night, and it's up at Orline and Company. Right now, you have 6 roads. It's a 6-way intersection that's coming into that intersection. And you have a concrete island in the middle of it. And there's some roads that there's some turns that we're prohibiting it to, some through movements that we're prohibiting with the island. So what we're proposing here is a roundabout that would clean this intersection up, give everybody the opportunity to go in any direction that they wanted to go in, and it would also create one of those gateway locations that Keith was talking about earlier. This is just an example of a roundabout that shows you what it could look like there, with different entry and exit points. Another issue, or what's going to be an issue, we hope, will be on-street parking. Right now, parking is not an issue in downtown, but as the downtown develops or redevelops, parking is going to become an issue. Or maybe not parking, but parking management. And there's an issue there now that merchants and employees want to park right in front of the businesses. And this, let me tell you, this is not unique to Wetumpka, Alabama. This is an issue that occurs all over the country. But as the demand becomes greater for parking spaces, you're going to need these people to move out to parking lots and leave the front door parking spaces for customers. So by doing this, you probably need to limit the on-street parking to 2 or 3 hours. And we're not talking about parking meters necessarily, but just use some method, be it marking tires or whatever, to enforce a parking restriction in downtown to promote parking turnover. Another, I won't say an issue, but another thing that needs to be addressed is off-street parking. As off-street parking develops, there needs to be a wayfinding system developed to direct people to these parking lots. And also, when you get to the parking lots need to be enhanced. Just a plain paved parking lot with no kind of landscape or anything is not very inviting. Especially in Wetumpka in July. There's nothing much hotter than just a paved lot with no trees or anything in it. So we suggest that you landscape these parking lots. And also enhance the periphery of the parking lots as well. A parking lot don't have to be just a paved lot. You can make it, I'm not going to say that they're the most beautiful things, but you can at least make them look better than just an asphalt parking field. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lee.
Thanks, Mickey. I'm going to talk a little bit, probably not too much, I hope not too much, and maybe a lot, about streets. There are a lot listed here, and unlike some of the downtown plans that we've worked on, there was a real focus here on the streets. There's not a lot of development pressure at this point for redeveloping historic buildings. You heard Keith talk a little bit about that, about the fact that the community, for the most part, wants to maintain their historic buildings. So there aren't property owners or developers chomping at the bit to redevelop their property. So we didn't have to spend a lot of time looking at how properties should be developed or working with property owners to help them achieve the city's vision of how they should be developed. So we actually looked at all of these streets. We put pencil to paper on this concept on how these streets could actually be redesigned and reconstructed. We'll show you a few of the cross sections. We haven't gotten around to developing cross sections for all of them. But just to get you oriented, we should look at this map quite a bit at this point. But Main Street coming north and south here, Bridge Street, Commerce Street here, just to the north of the courthouse, Court Street, which is too small to label. We heard a lot about Court Street, so we have some ideas on that. Courthouse Lane, Hill Street, Company Street, and then Spring, which is a little bit off. I don't think one line is on there, one line is here on the top. So all of these streets we looked at and we're providing recommendations on. These are some detailed recommendations for the cross sections that we were able to develop for the concept plan presentation tonight. This is Main Street from Bridge to Ready. Currently today, for the most part, there's about 45, 46 feet of pavement, which really accommodates 3 lanes of travel. So a travel lane in this context really only needs to be 10 to 12 feet wide, yet you have plenty of room here with 45 feet for 4 lanes. So the cross section that we're proposing, you can see the plan here, actually takes that center turn lane, which we're still accommodating turn movements at the intersections, which you can see in the overall plan. But in between the intersections, you could actually get a planted median in with travel lanes in either direction and then on-street parking. One of the things we tried to do was work within the existing curves. So we kept the curb lines where they are. Well, in some places there are no curbs. But where there are curbs, we kept the curb lines where they are because these streets aren't going to be reconstructed overnight. This is something that's going to take years and years to do. And it can be done a block at a time as funding becomes available. So we wanted to look at the most feasible ways, the most inexpensive ways to achieve a good streetscape and balance those modes of transportation like Nikki was talking about. And one of the ways we did that was by keeping the curbs where they exist today. What you get in that cross section, you can see here in elevation as well. You see the utility poles on Main are primarily on one side of the street. You might have to do understory trees, but you see the trees, the sidewalk and tree well at 10 to 11 feet, and then the center median at 10 to 12 feet, and the same thing mirrored on the other side. The median, this is just an example of what that median might look like. One of the things, there's a gentleman, I wish he'd come to some of our meetings, that maintains all of the planter, the hanging baskets around town. And he takes great pride in his work and does a great job at what he does. I would love to see him, turn loose on something like that. But this is showing Main. This is north that way and south this way. You can see City Hall here, and you can see where the turning movements, the left-hand turn lanes are accommodated where we can still pick up the medians. And the medians do a lot of things with the vertical street trees. They help narrow the perceived width of the roadway, so they slow cars, and the actual curving of the median also helps to slow cars, provides a more comfortable environment for pedestrians, and you see the on-street parking here along the street as well. Bridge Street from Main to Hill, this is looking back at the bridge, this is looking west. And this street was a bit of a challenge for several reasons, but one is the low overhead utility lines, which are on both sides of the road, they crisscross the road. And one of the ideas here, it's a 3-lane cross section, which you can see here, with traveling in one direction, and then a center turn lane that could be stamped in a pattern, or it could be a different color, something to again close the perceived width of that street to cause folks to drive a little bit slower. The head-end diagonal parking is kept, but the planters and the bulb outs, if you remember Nikki talking about the bulb outs at the intersection, instead of having those sweeping turns around the buildings,